All right, YouTube. We're on here a little before the webinar actually starts. Um, just a moment, and I'll get this going on Zoom as well. Hang in there, and we'll be going fully live momentarily. All right, we're at 1 o'clock, so I am going to go live on Zoom, although we're still going to give a little time for people to get logged in. So let's see. We've got 2 people logged in so far. Not sure how many might be watching on YouTube. But yeah, let's get the greetings out of the way. Gonna say good afternoon and welcome virtually to Mount Tamalpais State Park. My name is Hillary Collier, State Park Interpreter here on Mount Tam, and I am enjoying a wonderful view here on a beautiful day on Mount Tamalpais. I'm gonna apologize now. Despite the sunshine and warm weather and fine views, I am a little under the weather. So my voice, apologies that my voice isn't quite tip top. And also apologies if I have to pause to take a sip of something and get interrupted by coughing breaks. I may have to mute the microphone from time to time to cover up, just so you don't get bombarded with coughing noises. So there will be so Q&A is open for this program on Zoom. However, I will be only checking that at select intervals. So if you write something in there when I'm not looking, it may get buried by people asking later questions. So I know we had at least one classroom who was signed up for this program, and then the rest were individuals. But it is a good idea to have a pen and paper or pencil and paper or a little whiteboard and whiteboard marker, just some kind of writing implement handy. So you can jot down notes or jot down questions to ask later so that you don't forget them. And with that little bit of administration out of the way, let's get going again. So I'm going to say again, welcome virtually to Mount Tamalpais State Park, and welcome to this special California Biodiversity Week program. So I don't know if you've been tuning into any other webinars or going to any in-person programs for California Biodiversity Day, which was this last Saturday, September 7th, or if you other events during the week. But it's a time of year where we celebrate. We're dedicating our time to celebrating and understand the incredible variety of life that surrounds us, from the tiniest insects to the largest mammals, from fantastic fungi to towering redwood trees. Every native species plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance of our California ecosystem. So today it's a little, today's program about invasive plants is a little less about, celebrating biodiversity and a little bit more about how we can protect biodiversity. So with it being Biodiversity Day, Biodiversity Week, we're lobbing this word biodiversity around quite a lot. To define biodiversity, it is the variety of life in an area or ecosystem or habitat. So just all the variety of living things, including people and other animals, fungi, plants, algae, lichen, and even bacteria. And yeah, you can see there's a wide variety of life around us. So California, let's walk over here. So California is considered a biodiversity hotspot. Well, that's to say the California floristic province, which it does expand a little around, beyond the borders of the state of California, is considered a biodiversity hotspot. Here on Mount Tam, we're in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can see we're just north of San Francisco there. You can see there's the city of San Francisco across the bay. So the San Francisco Bay Area is considered kind of a hot spot within that hot spot. And Mount Tamalpais is kind of a hot spot in a hot spot, a hot spot. To give you an idea of what I mean by that, there are considered to be around 20,000 species of native plants in the United States. The California floristic province has over 3,400 species of plants, and over 2,100 of those species are endemic, which means that they're only found in California. And I am just focusing on plants because that is what this program is about. And to put Mount Tam in perspective, well, 20,000 for the United States, over 3,400 for California. Mount Tamalpais has at least 1,000 species of plants on it. That's pretty biodiverse. I think we also have about 250 species of animals, including 184 species of birds. So that is some pretty awesome biodiversity, as well as being pretty amazing. And I am going to share screen here with a map, just to give you a better idea of where we are. Say San Francisco Bay Area, but to be specific, yeah, here's the state of California. And here we are zooming in. I know the majority of people logged in are east or northeast of us. So yeah, you can see we're just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco in Marin County. Marin County is named for Chief Marin, a leader of the Coast Miwok people. Mount Tamalpais State Park is on land traditionally associated with Coast Miwok people, past and present. We are grateful for their stewardship of this land. And not just the state park, but all the parkland around here. You can see there is a lot of nature, a lot of protected spaces around Mount Tamalpais. So there's a lot, there's a lot of biodiversity here because there are so many protected spaces here. So forgive me, the screen does go a little black after I stop sharing because it decides to remind me that I've stopped sharing. So yeah, we'll flip the camera around again and take another look around. So you can get the idea of why we have this fantastic biodiversity. Well, just look around. From here, we can see many, many of the unique plant communities and habitats that make up this mountain. During the summertime, you can see over there, there's a community of Muir Beach. In the fog, during peak summer season, there was a day when in that wet, cold fog, it was 50 degrees in the 50s, like around 55 degrees Fahrenheit down there in Muir Beach. Whereas up here was 101 in the shade and a lot drier because the fog didn't come all the way up here. So all this variety of microclimates and all this, there's also a lot of variety of different soil types, different water levels, depending on which slope of the mountain we're on. So that leads to a lot of varied plant communities. Like down in that canyon there is Muir Woods National Monument, full of beautiful towering coast redwood trees. You can see lots of other woodland around there. There's mixed oak and Douglas fir woodlands scattered here and there. Over there, standing out a lot more with the grass dried out in the summertime. You can see coastal grasslands. There's more of that sloping down. Over there, we see kind of more greener areas that aren't trees. So that's where we have our coastal scrub, bushy environments characterized by a lot of coyote brush and other shrubby plants, as well as grasses and wildflowers. And up top here, we have chaparral. Chaparral is a great California ecosystem, characterized, mainly it's a drier, hardier, shrubby community. scrubbier, more shrub-like oak trees. Around Mount Tamalpais, it tends to be dominated by chamise and manzanita. Manzanita being one of my favorite plants here. So we've got this fantastic biodiversity here. And there are a lot of things that can affect biodiversity and negatively. You may have been hearing a lot if you've been attending programs or watching programs about effects of things like climate change or pollution harming our biodiversity. But something that you might not think of as a big danger to biodiversity is invasive species. And I'm going to be talking specifically about invasive plants. You might not think that plants can cause, unless you're familiar with this topic, you may not think, well, that plants can do a lot of damage. Like, what can they do? Well, according to the U.S. Forest Service, invasive plant species have contributed to the decline of at least 42% of threatened and endangered plant species in the United States. And of those 18%, invasive plants were the main cause of the decline of that threatened or endangered species. So they are actually a pretty big deal. But before I get too much talking about invasive plants and invasive species, invasive plants, I'd like to take time out to see if there are any questions in Q&A. Apologies to our viewers on YouTube, but I don't have a way, also since comments are disabled, I don't have any way to get your questions. Yeah, so get any questions about Mount Tamalpais out of the, if there are any out of the way before I talk about my subject of invasive plants on Mount Tamalpais. Oop, got a little notification popping up. How long have you worked there? From Amelia. Well, Amelia, I have worked here for not quite 2 years, but getting close to 2 years now. I've hiked a lot of the trails here, and I do love this place. And while working here, invasive plants has become something I've become a bit passionate about here because I love this place so much. All right. Don't know if it's just taking some time to type or if we don't have any other. Oh, there's another one popping up. So got a question from Isabel. How high up is the mountain? That's an excellent question. I'm just below the highest point on the mountain, the east peak of Mount Tamalpais. It is 2,571 feet. So our sister state park, Mount Diablo State Park. Mount Diablo's higher. So East Bay people, you can take that one. But we are the highest peak in Marin County, at least. And keep in mind that there will also be plenty of time for questions later on in the program, at which point you may have more. So I'm just going to take this one last question for now before moving on. So we've got, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to pronounce this very wrong. Giosue or Hyose? I'm very sorry. I'm probably butchering this name horribly. But yeah, are there any berry plants there? Well, there are loads. Actually, the manzanita that I was pointing out earlier does have berries. I mean, they are technically edible by people. They just don't have a great flavor or texture for most people, but they are great food for wildlife. But we do also have huckleberry bushes. The huckleberries are related to blueberries. There are some huckleberry bushes around, like around the bend from me, that we might take a look at later. We have wild blackberry and invasive Himalayan blackberry, thimbleberry, salmonberry, two species of elderberry, and maybe, oh, and gooseberries. I think we do have some gooseberries and currants on other parts of the mountain. So loads and loads of berries. Just maybe not as, probably the one you're most familiar with would be the blackberries. But unfortunately, nobody's allowed to, technically nobody's allowed to pick them on Mount Tam. And anyway, a lot of times there's poison oak growing in with the berry bush, the berry bramble. So yes, now we're going to be talking about invasive species on Mount Tamalpais. So before we get talking too much about what harm invasive plant species cause, and talking about some case studies here at Mount Tam, I think it's best to define invasive species. I'm going to share my screen for a presentation. And I can't just define invasive plants by invasive plants. I do need to actually define three different terms. So you have native plant, non-native plant, invasive plant. So yeah, those are three terms that if you're wanting to take notes, I made this card so it's easier for you to take notes or screenshot. So first, a native plant, I think that one's pretty straightforward. It is a plant that naturally, without humans introducing it, naturally occurs in an area. So in the United States, a native plant is defined as a plant species that was here before European colonization of North America. And as I said before, there are about 20,000 or more species considered to be native plants. Although, because scientists are defining finding a new subspecies and species every day, it could be more even. So native plants, they came here on their own, or at least they did, thousands of years ago. So they belong here. They're adapted to this environment. Non-native plants are plants that people introduced either on purpose by planting them in their gardens or in their fields for crops or as food for animals, or accidentally, just the seeds were caught in something. Pardon me. Oops. So non-native plants are plants that aren't naturally found here. So a lot of times people who came from Europe or Asia or Africa or South America, they wanted plants that reminded them of home. So they planted them. They wanted a grass that was better food for their cows or other livestock, or they just thought they were pretty, so they planted them here. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take a time out. You get bombarded with coughing noises. So non-native plant and invasive plant do not have the same meaning. And rather than me trying to memorize a good definition, I actually took this definition from the U.S. Forest Service's page on this. Is a fantastic page and a very good definition that even shows that it's also a legal definition. So what is an invasive plant species? An invasive species is defined as a species that is, one, non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration, and two, whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. So that's pretty clear cut, I think. So, and notice that just said invasive species, not specifically invasive plant species. So of course, and you might be familiar with invasive insect species, invasive fungi. So not just plants can be invasive species. And with these other invasive species, it's a little easier to understand the harm, like invasive insects, like invasive killer bees. They definitely cause environmental harm and economic harm by killing our native bees that are important pollinators. And they definitely cause harm to human health by stinging people. And then with invasive fungi, it's very clearly to see how much harm they cause to the environment. But you might wonder, what harm can invasive plants do? Quite a lot. And I will go in depth in that, but I do want to go back and clarify, pardon me, part of that definition. So notice here that it says an invasive species, like part one, it says non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration. So that means that even if that is where we come into clarity that non-native and invasive are not the same. Not all non-native species are invasive. So for example, daffodils. Daffodils are a common garden plant. There's no species of daffodil that is native to the United States, but they're all over the United States, but no state has them on an invasive species list because they tend to stay where people plant them. They don't tend to spread out and take over or cause any harm, although they are toxic and they don't, our native pollinators don't tend to like them, but they don't cause any significant harm. So they're non-native, but not invasive. And then some native plants that are native to an area can be invasive as well. So on one side here, on the left, we have the Monterey pine. It is native to Monterey in California. And in the Monterey area, it's a beautiful native plant. But it is alien to Mount Tamalpais. So actually on Mount Tamalpais, the Monterey pine is an invasive species because it causes harm to the environment. And here we've got a Douglas fir. It is native to many parts of the United States and is even native to many parts of Mount Tamalpais State Park. But it is invasive, so it is alien to some ecosystems on the mountain. So the coastal grasslands here, the Douglas fir is actually kind of invasive in that it takes over. So yes. So yeah. Native plants can be plants that are native to a state or country can be invasive in other parts of the country or other ecosystems, and not all non-native plants are invasive. So with that out of the way, that clarification out of the way, let's focus on what these harms invasive plants can do. Well, I mean, we've got a lot of wonderful native plants here. We've got like here, that's beautiful, and our coast redwood trees below. But these plants can be threatened by these invasive plant species. So invasive plant species can harm in a number of ways. So any plant to survive needs, certain things. So it needs space. You can see these plants here are filling up as much space as they can, not taken up by rocks. They need soil. So you can see they're taking advantage of every little bit of dirt on this rock, around these rocks. They need sunlight. So they can carry out photosynthesis and, convert water and carbon dioxide into their plant material. And they need that sunlight. And they need the nutrients in the soil. And they need water. So of course, here, these plants are not a lot of deep soil, so they have to get the water whenever it comes and quickly. They also tend to set up pretty deep roots to get the water that's in the rocks. So invasive plant species can take up those valuable resources and outcompete the native plants here. Also, so these invasive species do that because in their original habitat, well, they adapted to thrive, to send out as many seeds as they could, to take the most advantage of those resources. But when we bring them here, well, so you can say in their original habitat, they have a lot of competition, plants that they were competing against that keep them in control, animals that eat them or keep them under control, fungi and insects that keep them under control. But when they're introduced to a new environment, well, those controls, those enemies of that plant are absent, so they can just take over. They can also cause harm to people and people's livestock and native animals, in that they can contain toxic substances. They can replace plants that provide food food and shelter to animals, and they can also change the soil chemistry and the soil microclimate. So these are some big problems. And I think the best way to go into them is some case studies with specific invasive plants on Mount Tamalpais. So you'll have to forgive that these are a little worse for wear. I did collect these samples yesterday, so they're a little wilted now. So I'm going to start with one example, fennel. Now, fennel, some people find the big yellow flowers pretty. It is also a food and herb plant. So people would have planted it, has kind of a licorice-like smell to it. So people planted it for a number of reasons, but probably mostly for food. However, it took over. So as for the harm that fennel specifically causes, well, it grows like many invasive plants. It grows very well in disturbed areas. So like next to roads or places where they've been doing construction, or there was a landslide, or after a fire. And so when they grow in there, they can prevent other like native plants from coming back in there. And the fennel doesn't have as many benefits for the native animals as the species it's replacing. So, and it can also kind of block waterways. So, and also change the plant composition of habitat. So it's a bit of a problem, but not as big as some other ones. Another one I have here, which you're not going to be able to see as clearly. I've got this it's like sealed up in a Ziploc baggie because I did not want to spread the seeds. Okay, this is an invasive plant. This is a species of pampas grass. This species of pampas grass is also known as jubata grass. So people planted this along the coast because it looks pretty, gives things a tropical feel. But it puts out a lot of seeds, just like, it's like a grass, but with like massive dandelion head seeds. So the seed distribution, it can go crazy and take over. This is another thing that grows like crazy along the roadways, along the coast here. And some specific harms that this pampas grass can do is that, well, it can, because it does grow in coastal areas, and another important coastal plant is coast redwoods, it can actually inhibit reforestation after logging and heavy logging and deforestation of coast redwood forests. So because it grows so tall and shades things, it can actually block conifer seeds and young conifers from growing and reforesting deforested redwood forest areas. So that's a harm it can cause. It can also clog waterways. It grows along coastal streams, and it can block them because it spreads out. Like, you don't have the whole plant here, but the lower parts, like the leaf base, spreads out far. And those leaves are kind of sharp, so they can actually injure people and animals grazing in that area with the sharpness of the serrated blades on the lower shrub of the grass. And because that bushy thing can dry out and also collect a lot of other dry plant material like dry leaves, they can contribute to increased fire risk in areas. And because they're so big and bushy, they can also stop fire engines from accessing wildfire sites. So, I mean, there's a lot of harm, not just to the environment, but to people that this otherwise beautiful grass can cause. I'm going to need to put on gloves for the next one because this one's not one I should handle barehanded. Unfortunately, this one is very, very wilted now. This one is Cape Ivy. Now, Cape Ivy is originally from South Africa. South Africa has a very similar climate to California. So, of course, this plant grows very well. A lot of people planted it because it can form beautiful ground cover or grow up trellises, very similar to English ivy. So it grows well, and people find it pretty, and it gives them that kind of European feel with ivy climbing up everything. But this one's a big problem. Actually, this is a specific one I was pulling yesterday for a program. We were doing a Cape Ivy pull because this plant does a lot of harm to the environment and can cause harm to people as well. I mean, I'm handling it with gloves because the oil chemicals in this can actually cause a skin reaction that is not so pleasant. But this can outcompete native plants, drive them out. And not only does it take the place of other native plants like blackberries or morning glories on Mount Tamalpais, but because it's a climbing vine plant, it actually covers up other plants and blocks them from getting that sunlight. So it can kind of basically blanket and suffocate and black out trees if it grows in like dense enough quantities. And also there are toxic chemicals or toxic compounds in this plant that is harmful for animals that try to eat it. So our native animals can't eat it. And even more so, those chemicals, especially those alkaloids in here, can get into the water and cause problems for fish and amphibians in the water. So that's another harm that invasive plants can do. They can decrease water quality. So Cape Ivy's, not a great plant to have around, especially on Mount Tam. Oh, sorry, I was just going back to fennel. One of the other things like about invasive plants causing economic harm. Apparently, a large amount of fennel growing on your property can lower your property values. So there's something else to consider. And the last case study, that one tried to get away. Last case study I'm going to talk about is French broom. French broom. To think, when I first came to Mount Tam, I thought these beautiful, somewhat fragrant, continuously flowering yellow bushes, I thought they were pretty. Then I learned the harm that French broom can cause. So French broom is, one of the most serious invasive plant species we have here. And it can do a lot of harm in a variety of ways. I mean, sure, it does look pretty. And I imagine in France and other parts of Europe where it is native, I would, again, find it beautiful. But French broom, especially after wildfire or after like another disaster or development of an area, because like many invasive plants, it does well in disturbed areas, it can take over, it will pop in there first and then just make this massive area that is just this French broom. So take over an area and block other species out. And other species can include ones that are beneficial to our native animals. So it takes the place of berry bushes like huckleberry at lower elevations and offers very little in return. So I got a huckleberry Yeah, there's a little huckleberry bush right over here. So French broom can take over where huckleberries grow, and huckleberries, though, provide food for a large number of native animals. French broom does not. The foliage and the seeds are toxic. So animals, including our domestic animals, cannot eat them. I believe goats are the only animal capable of eating French broom without getting sick. And also, so besides taking over and outcompeting important plants, besides poisoning animals, because it puts out thousands and thousands of seeds, and those seeds can last for 10 years in the soil, like, yeah, they're really good at taking over. They can also cause environmental and economic harm because they grow very tall very quickly, and it's a very oily plant. So in the case of wildfire, they can make wildfires more intense, and when they're growing in forested areas, they can carry the fire up to the canopy, making that fire much more destructive. Also, I spoke of the invasive plants changing the soil. French broom does change soil chemistry and microclimates to make it more suited to itself and not other plants. And it doesn't just harm other plants. When it changes the soil, they say in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which borders Mount Tamalpais in many directions, like to the south here. Well, around there, it has contributed greatly to the decline of arthropod species. So a lot of, insect spiders and crustaceans, millipedes, centipedes. So French broom does a lot of harm. And it was just planted because it was pretty. So those are some case studies of the harm of invasive plants. The harm of a few invasive plants here on Mount Tam. So I saw a question pop up. What do we do if we see invasive species around? I see fennel pretty often. That's an anonymous attendee. Well, that's what. Actually, yeah, that's excellent segue into the next part of this. What can we do about this? So invasive plants can do a lot of harm. Well, obviously, getting rid of invasive plants is a good thing to do, but we have to be careful. So like in regards to protecting biodiversity, phrases you may have heard in programs this week or at other times include conservation. So conservation is the protection and restoration of the natural environment. And a big step part of conservation is stewardship. Stewardship is the supervision and taking care of an area or land space. And that's why a lot of projects for removing invasive plants are considered stewardship projects, but they need to be carefully managed. So on your own property, of course, if you find something that's invasive, take it out with gusto. But on public property, other people's land, it can be a little trickier. So it's best to either, if you want to take part in those stewardship activities, it's best to do in organized ones with the land manager. So land managers carefully balance the benefits of removing these invasive plants versus the harm that removal can cause. And also they try to prioritize which plants are more critical to go after. So fennel, yeah, if you see it growing along the roadside, I don't see any harm in pulling out, but it is very difficult to eradicate. And also you want to make sure you don't mistake it for a related native plant or a toxic plant. So that's another reason to join in with joining in with organized habitat restoration, stewardship, invasive plant polls is a good way to work out this problem. But I say strictly organized because one, like remember me wearing gloves for Cape Ivy, you might it's difficult to know what harm you could do to yourself pulling these plants out. Two, you can mistake it for a native plant. Like there's a native vine here called California manroot, which is a favorite of mine, which looks very similar to Cape Ivy. And there was an individual in the park one day who mistook it for an invasive plant, and like the invasive, like the California manroot mistook it for the invasive Cape Ivy and started ripping it out. No. Other things are I have the jubata grass, the pampas grass in the Ziploc baggie to prevent the spread of seeds. Pulling them out at the wrong time or in the wrong way can actually contribute to the spread of the plant. So if you're going to pull fennel, you don't want to pull it after it's gone to seed because that helps distribute the seed. And and also because you would need to pull it out all the way from the roots, the soil disruption caused by pulling it out can also do harm, which is a reason to do it under supervision. And a last consideration is that if you're gathering the fennel to eat, you don't want to besides mistaking it for similar looking native plants, you might mistake it for similar looking native or in other invasive plants that are toxic. Like fennel does look a lot like poison hemlock. So you do have to be careful with pulling these things. So that's why, we do careful analysis. So as part of an organized volunteer program or volunteer activity, yes, pulling out those invasive plants is a good thing to do in open spaces and parks. In your own property, definitely, you could pull it out and replace it with much more suitable native plants or non-invasive, non-native plants. As for other activities you can do, well, besides stewardship, there's also documentation. So documentation is taking a record of things, finding evidence. So in the case of biodiversity and invasive plants, I'm sure around Biodiversity Day and Biodiversity Week, you've been hearing a lot about bio blitzes. They're important for using iNaturalist to record observations of plants and animals and fungi and algae and all that amazing stuff is a great way to help scientists get more information about how our biodiversity is doing, how it's changing with climate change and pollution and invasive plants. And also, iNaturalist can be a great way to document invasive plants. So if you are anywhere and to use iNaturalist to participate in these BioBlitzes, including the California Biodiversity Day 30 Species Challenge, which I encourage you all to join. Besides, you can do that not just in natural spaces like Tamalpais, but you can do that in your own community. And don't just document things you think look cool or amazing or might be rare. Also, if it's a place you go regularly and you see a plant that you are suspicious doesn't belong there, putting that observation in iNaturalist is a good way to let people who are watching know. Because I know on Mount Tamalpais, our affiliated One Tam is our collaborative lands organization here on the mountain. I know One Tam natural scientists who are involved with the removal of invasive plants. They do look at that app and they do use it to track like all this information. So documentation using iNaturalist, or even like if you log into an invasive plant tracking app, that can be very helpful information, even if you aren't sure if you should or are unable to remove that invasive plant yourself. And well, for other things you can do without having to be as active, there's also education. So let people know um, about invasive plants. I'm not telling you to tell your neighbors what they can and can't plant, but if you're part of a homeowners association, and their rules for gardens actually encourage people to plant invasive plants, have them like talk to them about reconsidering those rules so that they favor, nice drought resistant native plants. Um, and you know, like if you're, for those of you who are in school, talk to your if you're make sure your school garden doesn't include any invasive plants, and talk to your teachers and principal and other administrators if there are any invasive plants in there. That you can look up the California Invasive Plant Council has a great website where you can get all the species of invasive or potentially invasive plants in California. And also you can do a little activism. So you can like if you find that a local nursery or other store that sells garden plants is selling these invasive plants, I'm not saying you should do anything to that store, but maybe put together a campaign with your friends and neighbors, get a petition going to try and get them to stop selling those plants. And now, don't just do that, but suggest other plants they could sell instead that are good substitutes. So those are my ideas. Maybe you have more ideas. So we're at the end of my part of the program. So now I'm going to leave it open entirely for Q&A. If you have any questions about what I talked about, or if you want to share your ideas about that you have about what we can do. While those questions get in there, I'm going to take time out to drink some of my ginger tea for my throat. All right. So we got a question from Adam. How are the native animal populations affected by invasive plants? What kinds of animals live there? Well, pardon? All sorts of animals. I said 250 animal species, including 184 bird species on Mount Tamalpais. So for example, I don't know if the microphones in my earbuds are picking them up, but there's a bird around here called a wren-tit. It's like makes a lot of kind of like alarm like calls and songs around the chaparral and also in the coastal scrub. And that bird eats a lot of huckleberries and manzanita berries, a lot of the little berries that grow around here. And French broom can actually grow in and outcompete and drive out those native berry bushes, and in turn, it provides no food for the wren-tit. So one way is by limiting food sources, and the Cape ivy, it can harm like put those toxic alkaloids into the streams when it grows next, because it does tend to grow near water as well, and that can harm the endangered coho salmon and the threatened steelhead trout that come into our creeks to spawn, to lay their eggs, and our California red-legged frog that breeds around these streams. Our state amphibian, it can be harmed by those. And yeah, so there's a lot of harm they can do. There's a wide variety of animals here, like other amphibians here, newts and salamanders, lots of reptiles, lizards, a bunch of different species of snakes, lots of insects. Pollinators, our native pollinators don't get as much sometimes from these invasive plants because they don't put out the smells or don't have the nutrients they're looking for. Many of our we have some species of butterflies and some species of bees around here that can only go to specific plants to get their nectar. And if these invasive plants take over, they don't have any food. There was a recent article, our one TAM scientists found a rare species of bee here. And yeah, those invasive plants taking over can be bad for those bees. There's many mammals, from little chipmunks and squirrels to coyotes and deer are the biggest ones we get around here. But there used to be bears around here, and every once in a while, a black bear will wander back in. Oh yeah, mountain lions also very occasionally. So lots and lots and lots of different animals here. Oh, don't even get me started on how many birds we have here. It's 184 bird species. So, biggest bird I've seen here is a bald eagle flying way overhead. But for ones that hang out, turkey vultures, red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, ravens. And there's more flowers blooming. Hummingbirds. Ooh, there's another bird. Yeah, hummingbirds can't get nectar from French broom, whereas they can get plenty of nectar from huckleberry bushes and manzanita bushes when they're blossoming. So, any other questions here? Well, I've taken, yep, another one popped up. So Paige has the question, what is your favorite plant on the mountain? Well, I mean, it's hard to pick one favorite. One of my favorites is it's also found in Yosemite National Park and other parts of the state. It's Western azalea. I do love the Western azalea because it smells amazing, and has pretty flowers. So when it's flowering, it smells amazing. But probably my absolute favorite are manzanita, and we actually have. So there are dozens and dozens, I think even maybe now over 100 species of manzanita. Most of them are found in California. And on Mount Tamalpais, there are at least 5 species of manzanita. 2 of them are found only around here. So this one's, I believe, Eastwood's manzanita, which is found in other places, but there's a Mount Tamalpais manzanita that is only found on Mount Tamalpais. There's a lot of serpentine rock on the mountain, and that serpentine rock makes soil, which is, has soil that is not very suitable for a lot of plants, because it has less nitrogen and calcium and more heavy metals. So the Mount Tamalpais manzanita is uniquely adapted to live in that harsh soil. But yeah, because this isn't serpentine soil, we don't have any on East Peak. So here we've got the teacher, Mr. Bailey, is asking a question. What would be a good resource to learn more about invasive species? Well, I should have gotten that. I should have had that tab active in Safari. Here, let's share screen again, because I'm gonna. So let's bring up the California Invasive Plant Council. There we go. So California Invasive Plant Council's webpage is a great resource for learning more about invasive plants. Also, the U.S. Forest Service page on invasive plants provides, like, if you need to refresh yourself on the definition and the harms, that is a good one-page resource about a lot of the points I talked about. But yeah, so this site includes not just a list, like A to Z, but also plants and horticulture. It suggests alternatives to invasive plants in your garden. It has little cards to help you identify them and how to know how to remove them. And it also has the Weed Workers Handbook, which has in-depth information on how to remove specific invasive plants. Like, it'll have stuff like wearing gloves when handling Cape ivy or making sure to get the root. So that is SoCal IPC. Is a great resource and just like a great resource for upcoming events. So if you are looking for like a habitat restoration event or another biodiversity week event, there's still a few days left, tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday left in biodiversity week. So you can find an in-person event near you, which could include habitat restoration work and a lot of local parks. We don't have as many, but our neighboring Mount Tamalpais watershed by Marin Water, they have regular plant habitat restoration work, Marin County parks. And so parks near you are very likely to have like habitat restoration days or broom pole days or something separate from biodiversity day and biodiversity week. But yeah, there's the link and the QR code. So do join an in-person event near you, or do join an online event like a bio, kind of in-person and online event, like a BioBlitz. And especially that 30 species challenge on iNaturalist to find 30 species. I actually did I found 30 species just on the trail I'm on now. So last weekend, I walked this loop trail. It's less than 1 mile around the top of the mountain, and I got my 30 species. So we are coming up to the end of our program. So I'm going to thank you all again for joining me on this Biodiversity Week program. We hope you've gained a deeper appreciation for the incredible biodiversity of California and the threats it faces and the vital roles the native species play in our ecosystem. So yeah, like now it's your turn to get involved. As I said, check out the California Biodiversity Day webpage. Search near you with your local county parks, regional parks, state parks, national parks, National Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, any of your local agencies to find activities like cleanups or habitat restorations, or just to listen to wildlife talk to find out other ways you can help. And yeah, and just, as I said, stewardship and documentation. So documentation, yeah, just get out there, enjoy that nature, make your observations. And remember, you are a part of that ecosystem as well, and you can do your part to help maintain the balance in that ecosystem. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I've been Hillary Collier at Mount Tamalpais State Park. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful California Biodiversity Week. So I got to thank you from anonymous attendee. You're welcome. Take care, everyone, and get out there and enjoy nature. Find your nature, your biodiversity. And another thank you, so you're welcome.